Hey, it's Drybear. Back again with another Diablo 4 build guide, and today we're going to be talking about my Raging Inferno Sorceress build. This one is hot. Now, I already posted a combustion build that focuses on burning and stacks of burning for Sorceress, but this one primarily is going to focus on the damage coming out from Incinerate. I would feel remiss as your resident guide maker and consecrator if I didn't give you a true flamethrower build. But first, you should come hang out with me on my live stream. I'm live every single day on twitch.tv/Drybear. If you don't come hang out with me in the community, the next time you get pizza with friends, your side of the pizza will have slightly less toppings than theirs. All right, let's get into the build. This is the Raging Inferno Sorceress. This one focuses primarily on doing Incinerate damage. I will warn you about this build. This is probably the highest mana hog build I have made for Sorceress yet, so you will need to commit a lot to generating more mana and refunding mana and proccing more mana in order to get into Incinerate and channeling it for longer and longer and longer. I have the full build built on d4builds.gg. I did it before the video. It's linked down in the description. This will have your gems, your legendaries, your full skill build, all of your abilities up to level 50 when you unlock Paragon, and then a first pass on a Paragon board that I think works well for this build with synergies. Just keep in mind, it is a first pass without knowing everything about endgame and being able to play endgame to its fullest late into the night without sleep. It's hard to know how perfect this is, but it is a decent build and it will scale and synergize with the build overall. We will start, as we always do, with the builder, and we'll go down the tree talking about each of the abilities and why they're important. Because we're doing fire damage, we're gonna get a lot of bonus fire percent damage. We wanna do a builder that has fire on it, as well as an ability to apply burning. Because even though we're not doing the pure combustion build where we wanna have lots of stacks of burning and different sources of burning, we still benefit from having burning, and we get damage amplifiers from hitting targets that are burning. So we want to be reapplying burning enough to the target so that we are getting value out of that. Firebolt does exactly that. It gives us a way to get mana, which is really nice. It pierces through burning enemies, so it gets a little bit of AoE when you're building up mana back. And crits with Firebolt increase the burning damage you deal to the enemy by 20% for 4 seconds, which is kind of nice. It's a nice little throughput increase, but our big mama, hot mama jama is going to be Incinerate. This one channels a big old flamethrower for you, which has pretty decent range and damage output. And when you activate this, we're gonna make it so that while you're channeling, your burn increase, you would burn enemies around you for a percent of damage per second. So not only is it frontal, but it also has an immediate melee. So any melee mobs that are coming in close and hitting you, even if you're not directly facing them, you'll still do burn damage. And then we're gonna pick up enemies deal less damage while burning from Incinerate. We're gonna have to stand still for this. It is a stand still and channel ability. So damage reduction is gonna be king. We wanna have barriers and protection. We're even gonna run a proc for immunity till we have that built into that as well. There are some variant fire builds that focus on immobilizing, but these generally use meteor and storms and things like that in order to use immobilize and proc bonuses. We're not focused on that with this build, so we're gonna skip a lot of these synergies that come along the way. Going into the next tree, obviously you can pick up maximum mana here for devastation. We're gonna have that in the build as well. Max mana is nice. And then we're gonna come down and we're gonna pick up ice armor. I actually toiled a bit between flame shield and ice armor for this build. It's pretty tough choosing this. And I actually think that overall, ice armor beats out flame shield. Flame shield gives you immunity, but it lasts a lot less time. And it's more focused on being able to move around, whereas ice armor is a little bit tankier. Even though you don't have the immunity, it still lasts a lot longer. And your damage dealt adds to the barrier, which means when you're standing still, throwing out your flamethrower, you make the barrier better. We also have other ways to increase the duration of the barrier, which is nice, and other ways that we can modify barrier bonuses as well. So I think for this build specifically, even though there is synergy with Flame Shield and the damage it does, I think I'd much rather have ice armor for this. And keep in mind that any sorcerer build, it doesn't matter what it is, there's always room to run teleport. So even though I don't have teleport in this build, you could replace one of the abilities with teleport just for the extra mobility. It's nice to be able to move around the room very freely, but this is focused on synergy and damage output. Coming down into Conjuration, we're going to pick up the Hydra. There should be no surprise there. There's tons of synergy with Hydra and Fire. Gives us extra damage, and we have a way to apply Burning as well, which gives us more damage throughput and damage increase for our Incinerate. We're also going to do it so when you cast a healthy, your cast of Hydra gain 1 additional head, and we're going to gain additional Hydra spawns as well. And with the enchantment, we're going to make it so after spending 300 mana, remember, we're mana hogs with this build, we're going to spend mana like crazy. Another 5-headed Hydra spawns for 5 seconds. We are also going to put in the enchantment for Incinerate. Every 18 seconds, a serpent spawns and starts channeling Incinerate. It's kind of like the Shadow Priests in WoW, where you can get an additional deployable that spawns and does the main thing that you're doing as well. So another Incinerate going forward, super nice. We like that a lot. So good synergy there. And we'll talk about some more bonuses once we get to the legendaries and the uniques in your kit overall. Coming down here, we're going to pick up the barrier duration because we will rely quite a lot on barriers and ice armor, which is a barrier. We're going to pick up a little bit of damage increase while healthy. We can't guarantee we're going to be healthy, and it's not an overpowered build, so we're not going to put too many points into this. You could also reclaim some points and try to get the increased damage against burning enemies, but this is primarily for what I would call the immobilize meteor build, which is quite different than the build we're talking about today. For the mastery ability, we really want Firewall. The primary reason for this, not only does Firewall give us good damage, there are some proc benefits we can get for walking through Firewall, but the main reason why I like having Firewall in this build is it's another burning damage. We're going to make it so that they take increased damage while they're standing in Firewall, and we do have plenty of burning damage. And you have 5% increased mana regeneration per active Firewall, which is huge. We like that quite a lot. So we're actually, instead of running the Hydra, we're going to run with the Firewall enchantment. Sorry, I got that confused. Firewall is here. We want this because the burning damage has a chance to spawn 2 more Firewalls. The reason we like that is because for every active Firewall, we have increased mana regeneration. So we want enchantment on this one here. We pop this. When we get multiple Firewalls on the ground, we're getting burning damage, bonus damage. We're also getting increased damage on the target, but we're also getting mana regeneration, which again, we need a lot of for this build. So it's mostly just for the mana that we're getting back on that. Coming down into the ultimate part of the tree, we're obviously going to pick up Inferno. That is the burning ultimate. There's some really nice things in gearing that we can use for Inferno for this build specifically, but it's a nice big instant cast, a very low cooldown, perhaps the lowest of all the ultimates in the game. It's very short at 45 seconds base, but when you put it down, it burns enemies for damage over time. You can have it pull enemies in, and you can put a Firewall on top of them and then just throw out your flamethrower Incinerate. And while Inferno is active, this is the big winner. So for the duration of Inferno, your pyromancy skills cost no mana, which means you can get all the stacking benefits for Incinerate, which there's damage that goes up the longer you channel. When you pop your ultimate, which has a very short cooldown, for the duration of this, you get free Incinerate. Your flamethrower is free. You can build those stacks up, and then when Inferno ends, you can actually just have those stacks rolling and keep doing Incinerate while that's up. Passives here, you probably just want to get all of these. Killing a burning enemy increases your mana regeneration. We love that. After standing still for 1.5 seconds, which we're going to stand still a lot, pyromancy skills cost less mana. So while you're flamethrowing, after a few seconds, you now have less mana cost for the flamethrower. Every 1 second, you heal for your maximum life for each nearby burning enemy. Everyone around you should be burning at all times. And you get increased healing for bosses. So again, another way for you to stand still and stay standing still. And then you deal increased burning damage to enemies for each second they remain burning, up to a maximum of 5 seconds, which helps a lot with killing elites and bosses. We just get more burning damage out of that as well. Coming down here, I would have to test both of these because I think there's value in each one of them. For the combustion build, I think you want to get more sources of burning to make this fully work. But you could get the minimum requirement for getting the double bonus. However, there's a legendary that I want to take advantage of here to use with Isu's Ferocity. This says that your fire crit damage is increased by 25% against enemies above 50% life. Your fire crit strike chance is increased by 5% against enemies below 50% life. And killing an enemy with a crit grants both bonuses against all enemies for 3 seconds. And there's a legendary that goes along with this that works really well. I think this works great. You should have a relatively decent amount of crit. We're not going to be stacking dexterity like crazy because we need the willpower, but the crit damage here should proc well enough because we're hitting so often. We have burning going and ticking damage. We have so many sources of constant damage that we should be able to crit enough to get this here. And it does help pretty nicely against bosses as well, because we have extended durations of crit damage and crit chance as they're finishing off. And that crit if you crit kill an enemy in general, you'll get that bonus, which is really cool. So that's the skill tree for this Incinerate Flamethrower build, the Raging Inferno. Let's go over to the gear and talk about what fits here for the gear in general. These are your legendaries and your uniques. We're going to talk about first the gems. I think you can actually get ultimate skill damage for weapon. There's plenty of choices here. None of them are like a crazy amount of damage. You don't really get too much from Firebolt, so Topaz doesn't make a lot of sense. You probably could try to get damage over time because it'll affect your burning, but I have a feeling that these probably end up parsing pretty similar because Inferno does do a lot and it does have a short cooldown. For armor, we like max life and you want resistance. You could probably run armor here as well from skulls just because you are standing still a lot, so you're going to take a lot of projectiles and a lot of melee attacks, but just keep that in mind. Moving on to the uniques in this build. There's legendaries, uniques, and there's stuff even after that, which we can't predict because we don't know what they are yet. But for the uniques here, these are pretty rare items that you'll have to grind for. But once you get them, they change the build quite a lot. And I like including them here so that people know that they're coming down the pipe. You can look forward to it at the end of your build, and it does enhance a lot of these builds. So the two uniques that I would recommend running with this build are going to be Esu's Heirloom. What this does is your crit chance is increased by a percentage of your move speed, and we do have ways to proc move speed. You can even run with the legendary that gives you move speed going out of the firewall, so you can even more, and that gives you crit chance, which again, adding crit chance for our key passive here means that we'll proc the double bonus more often, and it scales with crit damage and even more crit chance when they're lower HP. The other unique makes this build so much more comfortable. So if you're playing and you're still trying to learn the ways of mana conservation, Mother's Embrace is a ring that is awesome. If a core skill hits 5 or more enemies, 40% of the resource is refunded. So every time Incinerate hits 5 or more enemies, which if you're doing any kind of mobbing, it will. It's a very long line of flame. You'll refund mana. You'll get that mana back. You can keep channeling. This makes the channeling uptime much higher. Super nice. Work towards getting this as well. Now let's talk about the legendaries that are in the build that work really well for this. Starting with the Helm, you're standing still all the time, and anytime you're in a big pack of mobs in melee range or close range, you want to run or consider running Crowded Sage. What this does is for each enemy that's within close range of you, you heal life per second, which is awesome. You're just constantly regenerating life. It keeps you alive. Even if people chew through your barrier, you still have that that throughput, that healing that keeps you going throughout the combat. Aspect of Disobedience is decent here as well. You gain increased armor for 4 seconds when you deal any form of damage, stacking up to 50%. So it's armor, increased armor. Again, we're standing in melee. We're going to be getting hit by melee attacks and ranged physical projectiles a lot. What's great about this is for any time you deal any form of damage, including your burning ticks. So as you're ticking burning and you have your firewalls on the ground and you're flame throwing everywhere, you'll be able to stack this up very, very quickly because you just need to get that extra little bit of hits. And you can maintain it as long as you're dealing damage in general. Conceited aspect for the gloves is great. You deal increased damage while you have a barrier active. Remember, we have a way to apply barrier with ice armor. We have Paragon that gives us barrier. We even have Skill Tree that gives us barrier. And while that barrier is up, we just deal increased damage, which is nice. Protecting aspect is one that I don't often recommend running in a build unless you can take full advantage of the 3 to 5 seconds of immunity. It has a pretty lengthy cooldown. It can only occur every 90 seconds. But what I like about running in this build is the longer you can stand still and flame on, the more damage this does, the more this gets rolling, the more momentum you can get. So in some boss fights and some big pulls on hard content, getting that immunity bubble, even though it's only every minute and a half, could actually prove to be very game ending for that situation, and it can also help you kill some specific bosses. There's plenty of options here for the pants slot, for defense in general. You can do some really cool stuff with this, but I really do want to play with this. And what's cool about the protecting aspect is you get an amulet in Act 1 that gives this to you. So right away you can start using this and helps you stand still and incinerate to your heart's content. For weapon, I like running Aspect of Conflagration. While channeling Incinerate, which should be most of the time, your burning damage is increased. So you get a pretty good throughput on damage output. I don't think this is a good contender for running this as a two-hander. I think you do want an offhand in this build just because the burning damage it's part of your damage, it's part of your overall DPS, but it's not like everything like a combustion build would be. For the offhand, I recommend getting Aspect of Ancient Flame. What's cool about this is while both bonuses, which is from their key passive here, when you kill an enemy that's burning, you get both bonuses of SU for 3 seconds. While you get the crit damage and the crit chance from this, while that's active, your attack speed is increased by 50%, which means that increasing the tick rate, increasing the flame rate, increasing the incinerate rate, it gives you this nice little build-up. And of course, that can really help with stacking up disobedience as well. If you go into a new fight with no stacks up, anytime you tick damage, you stack up armor, it gets you right back up to those stacks very fast. You get that nice little burst of attack speed. For your amulet, I think you can run Serpentine Aspect here. We're going to spawn a lot of Hydras. The Hydra duration isn't as important for us, but we do like having an extra Hydra. So as you enter into a new room, a new encounter, you can put down a Hydra, put down a second Hydra, you proc Hydras while you're burning, and you also spawn Hydras that will incinerate as well, and doing more incinerate. So you just got more flames going on all the time. We already talked about Mother's Embrace, which was your first ring option there. And then the second ring I recommend is you deal increased damage for each second you stand still, up to 30%. So you can go all the way up to 30% for standing still for 3 seconds. Again, another reason why I like running Protecting Aspect when you get this proc. Stand in your immunity bubble, start channeling, and you'll see with the Paragon board and of course the options we have in our skill tree, the longer you channel Incinerate, it builds up more and more damage. It has less and less mana cost. So the more we can benefit from keeping Incinerate going for at least 3 to 5 seconds, we get a lot of really great synergy from that. So getting legendary and gear that builds off of that helps us out tremendously. Let's wrap out the video with going through the Paragon board. Again, this is a first draft on Paragon without knowing everything about endgame and experiencing it over several weeks. It's hard to know exactly how much defense versus offense versus synergy versus glyphs we're going to need, where the stat breakpoints are, how important these over-under benefits are here to get the extra node scaling, all of that. It's hard to know how to get the perfect Paragon board, but I wanted to leave you with at least one that works well and has plenty of synergy for this build specifically. So when you hit 50, which you will pretty quickly, you can start building your Paragon and you're not left in the dust. You're not left alone with this build sheet. So let's go through what works for Raging Inferno. We start with the basic board. Again, we're going to be looking towards intelligence and as much willpower as we can get. Willpower gives us resource generation, mana generation, that helps us incinerate for longer and longer. So we want int for skill damage and willpower. So we're going to come up here, we're going to pick up the magic damage scaling, where our first glyph is going to be Unleash. All of the magic nodes scale up, and after spending 50 mana, you deal increased damage and gain mana regeneration. Unleash is awesome. We love this one. It gives us mana regeneration and increased damage, and it's very easy to pick up for the first board. Remember, the requirement for the additional bonus is listed on the glyph. For this one to be active, within this red area, we need to have 40 intelligence, which is 8 5 intelligence nodes. So we need 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8. That gives us 40 intelligence in the area. It'll activate the passive, which gives us increased damage and mana regeneration. And we're gonna grab both the offense and defense options here. We're gonna kind of dip out of this board, picking up willpower on the left side, and then we're gonna go straight into our first board, which is going to be Burning Instinct. This one is our primary board. We like Burning Instinct a lot, and you can see I did some wacky stuff here, but I have good reason for doing this the way that I did. So we're gonna start out at the very bottom of Burning Instinct. I love coming in here from the bottom because the glyph is right to the left. We can jut over and grab it, being very efficient with our points. We're gonna come over here and we're gonna grab damage reduction from enemies that are burning. This just gives us free damage reduction, which is awesome. We come over here, we get damage to burning enemies. All enemies can burn, including bosses, so it's easy for us to have full uptime on this. And then we're gonna grab the Pyromaniac Glyph. Increase Paragon nodes, 40% bonus to their fire damage, but also every pyromancy skill you cast or every second you channel Incinerate, our main ability, increases your fire damage by 2% for 6 seconds up to 10, which means that we get max damage scaling on Incinerate once we've been channeling for 5 or more seconds, and that buff lasts even if we stop channeling it and it affects all fire damage. Another reason why we want to build as much as we can into keeping Incinerate rolling for as long as possible so we can get another one of these benefits. We're gonna grab willpower and some crit from the dexterity as we go up here. We're gonna grab damage to burning enemies, damage to elites. We grab the intelligence and the willpower. We come up here, we grab damage reduction from enemies that are burning, and primarily we're gonna grab the legendary node from Burning Instinct, which is your burning damage is increased by 40% of your crit damage, further increased by 5% for every 20 intelligence you have, which why intelligence is so valuable for us in general. But what's cool about this is your burning damage goes up by your crit strike damage. Remember, we have plenty of crit strike damage in the build, but we also have a key passive that when we're hitting targets that are above 50% life, our crit damage is increased by 25%. A percentage of that crit strike damage will be converted into scaling burning damage. Really cool synergy. All of that works really well together. Then we have willpower int along here, getting more of that. We're going to pick up into Searing Heat, which is your other damage one. This one is a little bit more focused on the immobilized meteor build that I talked about earlier, but there's still some synergies that we want to pick up in this board. So we're going to come up to the far left because we get fire damage percent here and fire damage over time. Works excellent for this build. You want at least 475 intelligence for this because that gives you another 10% fire damage, and that's for your total board, which is why we have 490 in general. Fire damage over time, fire damage. Then we're going to cut over into Static Surge, which is the lightning one, but there's some benefits for us in this. We're going to go up, picking up as much intelligence and willpower as we can, go into the board and cut straight down because down here, damage to stun enemies, maximum mana. Maximum mana, maximum mana. Excellent. Very, very good. You want the maximum mana here. You don't need the intelligence proc. And you can even free up these damage to stun enemies because you're not going to get too much. You can even free up this slot here and just turn that into willpower. We come up here and we grab resistance because it's a little bit more value than here. You could grab dexterity if you wanted to just go around, but it's kind of free. And we're going to get as much stats here. This is generally more stats than I would get on a Paragon board. But again, we want lots of willpower, lots of intelligence. We come up into the Enchantment Master board, which increases your enchantments. We're going to grab as much willpower and int as we can along the way. A little bit of potion healing goes a long way, gives you value. Then we're going to come down and get the key passive, which is your enchantments are 20% stronger. So that increases our free serpent that breathes fire, as well as the chance to spawn firewalls, which gives us mana back, which means we can channel again for longer on the Incinerate. So as we cut over, we grab this. We want a little bit more damage reduction on that as well. We're going to cut through this, pick as much more intelligence and willpower as we can. We're going to go into Elemental Summoner, and here we go again. Maximum mana, maximum mana, maximum mana, maximum mana. More mana, which means when we have high mana regeneration with all of our procs active, there's not like this over regen factor where we're at full mana and we're wasting the regeneration. More mana gives us value. And also remember, when we spend things over 50 mana and there's synergies that go along with that, it gives us more value. So a whole bunch, like it's 24 mana, max mana here. We come down, we get even more stats. Then we go right back down into Searing Heat. The reason I did this is I didn't want to get a whole lot of points in here. And I just wanted stats out of this because we have damage reduction and extra pieces here. You could even come down, reclaim some of this here. If you don't need the extra mana, reclaim this whole branch and then grab up the fire damage that's right there. But then we come down, we get this glyph, and we're going to pick up Flame Feeder. Every 5 dexterity purchased within range, you get increased damage to burning targets, which for us is just free because every target is burning all the time. If you get 25 dexterity in rage, it increases the direct damage to burning enemies as well. We can also get some extra fire resistance or int if we wanted, but really we're just here to pick up the dex because that's what scales this up. We want more dex. For every 5 dex, we get increased damage to burning targets, fire damage, fire damage, fire damage, fire damage, willpower for mana regeneration. So this is my first pass on the Raging Inferno Paragon board. This will work just fine until we know more about the end game and I get a chance to finesse and clean this up and make it even better. So leave a comment down below if you use this build, if you like burning, if you're a pyromaniac of some kind, and you like just having a flamethrower, this one is for you. Comment anything you see that you would like to see improved or ideas you have for this build specifically. And of course, let me know what you would like to see in the future. I'm happy to make more video guides for you guys and keep that rolling. See you on stream. Bye-bye. If you enjoyed yourself today, leave a like down below. You can support me and my work on Patreon and view Patreon exclusive content. Link in the description. Thank you so much for tuning in, and I'll see you in the next one.